And he's sitting here today, so that's a blessing for him. And lastly, I wanted to share one of my favorite stories from the Bible is Lazarus. And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with it, but Lazarus was a friend of Jesus, and he had gotten sick, and his sister sent a message to Jesus telling Jesus that Lazarus is sick and they wanted him to come to save him. Jesus said that he would go there, but by the time he made it there, Lazarus had already died. And one of his sisters told Jesus that if he had showed up a little earlier, Lazarus wouldn't have died, it would have been all right. And I relate to that story because sometimes that's the way it is for us. You know, we call out to Jesus about something that we need help with, that we're struggling with, and we ask him if he would just show up on time and show up in our situation will be all right. And there's times when Lazarus dies and our situation gets to a point where we think that there's no coming back from it. Sometimes we have dreams, sometimes we have hopes, and sometimes we think that those things are gone because they've passed. Jesus showed up and he told the sisters to roll the tomb back, and they said no, because he'd been there for a few days and that his body was stinking. And sometimes that's the way it is with our hopes and dreams. I related to that really well the 2 times that they denied me parole, because I thought that I was doing the right thing at the time, and I thought that I had deserved it. So they ended up rolling back the tomb, and Lazarus ends up coming out, and Jesus tells him to walk. And Lazarus is raised to life again. And that's the kind of God that we serve. We serve a God that can bring back our dreams and our hopes. We serve a God that believes in restoration. I spent 26 years in prison, and I got out just about 6 months ago, a little over 6 months ago. And it's a blessing for me to be here. Not just standing here, for me it's a blessing just to be around Chris. I knew Chris for quite a few years while I was in prison, and ended up developing a really good friendship with him. And it's a blessing for me to be here with him. I'm seeing that story of restoration in a lot of people's lives. People that I've met today, my good friend John, he did the same thing, and I love to toot his horn for him because he played arguably one of the greatest high school football teams, De La Salle, back in the 90s, and ended up throwing away an NFL career and ended up going to prison. And I had the honor of spending some time with him in the cell and becoming his friend and his brother in Christ. And now today, he's doing the same thing. He has his wife and his family back. He has a good job, and he's out there living a restored life. Those things to me, those are the blessings right there. So I just wanted to thank Chris and everybody here for giving me this opportunity to share my story today. Thank you, guys.
Wow. Amazing, right? Wow. So we're going to do a quick presentation run about what Mercy and Grace has accomplished over the last year. So team, why don't we run that presentation, please? witnessed 1,368 salvations behind prison walls. We're doing an average of 24 services behind prison walls a month. God has just richly blessed this ministry, as you can well see. Chris has almost 300,000 miles on his car alone, but we have tireless volunteers traveling all across the state to provide these church services to these 9 state prisons. And it's all made possible by donors, by supporters, and our volunteers that give and serve with passion, with living in God's calling in their life. And it's such an honor and a blessing to serve alongside of each and every one of them. So let's give them a round of applause now. There are some key dinner sponsors. If you want to put that dinner sponsor slide back up there, please. We have some key dinner sponsors. Cornerstone Fellowship has been wonderful. This facility, if you don't have a home church and you live in the area, Cornerstone Fellowship is a wonderful home. So come on out and check a service out. The Conleys, always, every event, what can we do? How can we help? What can we do? How can we help? Constantly, they're at all our tournaments, all of our fundraisers, and they're constant supporters of the ministry. The same with Barnett Plumbing, Phil Barnett and team. Boneheads Texas Barbecue handled all the food. Thank you, God, for Dave and his team. Yeah, let's give him a round of applause. His Way Recovery Home provided 40 volunteers. Let's give his way. We want to thank you. Tennyson Electric, constant supporters, and they're the same as the Conleys. What can we do? When do you want it? What can we do? How can we help you guys grow this ministry? And if I didn't mention your name, I know there are many, many, many supporters that buy tables at our events, that come to our golf tournaments, and we want to say thank you, Jim and Carrie Moore. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys are awesome, and it's by donors like you that invest in the future of this ministry, that allows us to travel those miles, that allows us to invest in the things that we need to do to build this ministry. Now, there's a card on your table, and it actually is it's a small card, so you should have it in front of you somewhere. It looks like this on the back. I just want to share briefly. If you want to get equipped, if you want to get activated, we have some trainings coming up. Mercy and Grace 101 is what you go to find out how you would like to serve and what we do, a little more in-depth training. Yes?
You mentioned Big House Beans or Tennyson Electric.
I mentioned Tennyson Electric, and thank you. Big House Beans actually provided all the coffee. Great coffee. They also have a promo that if you buy a coffee subscription, and thank you, Chris, for pointing that out, they will actually donate 10% back to Mercy and Grace. So they're a partner in ministry. The founder actually was in prison, has a great story. There's cards on your table, and he employs ex-inmates, and he owns a coffee roasting business now. What a wonderful thing he's doing for the community that get out of prison and are looking for employment. So Big House Beans, look them up online and get your coffee subscription today delivered to your doorstep. Thank you, Chris. So back to the training. Come and learn about how to get activated and equipped. Now, December 5th, we have a vision casting event, and we have an equipping event. The vision casting will be talking about the future of the ministry, and we're going to go more into depth about the equip, empower, and deploy model and what that looks like. It's about equipping volunteers. It's about getting them activated in more in-depth Bible study. We're actually going to do some work with Western Seminary in bringing in some classes to build up that foundation of knowledge. So when we're bringing in our preachers and teachers, they have some additional foundational knowledge from a seminary. We're also going to be showing people or revealing what their calling is in their life, and that's what we call the empower part. And then the deploy part is just deploying into prison ministry, deploying in the different areas that we serve in. But here's the key. It's not about us just going in and doing this behind prison walls for the volunteers. It's about equipping, empowering, and deploying the inmates to transform that prison from the inside out. That is our ultimate goal. But we do it through empowering our volunteers, and that could be you. So grab that card, sign up online, and come out and see us. Now at this point in time, I would like to introduce our next speaker. Warden William Muniz has been warden or acting warden at Salinas Valley State Prison since 2014. He has served in several positions at the institution since 1998, including Chief Deputy Administrator, Correctional Administrator, Captain, Lieutenant, and Sergeant. Muniz served as a correctional officer at the CTFs, which is right next door to Salinas Valley, from 1994 to 1998. And Mercy and Grace is honored to have him speak with us tonight. So let's give a warm welcome to Warden William Muniz.
Good evening. It's a great opportunity to be here tonight with you all. Drove a little ways to get up here, but it was our pleasure and our honor to be here with you. Just as a point of reference, as a state employee, I have to be really mindful about the separation of church and state. But I'm not actually on duty tonight, so for starters, God created the heaven and the earth. They asked me to speak on 3 things and hold me to 15 minutes, and I will do my best, where I'm sure they will pull me off the stage. Volunteers, the church, and the state of the prison. First of all, Chris was talking a little bit about pointing. We call that a snitch blade in prison. Not a switch blade, but a snitch blade. You don't point that thing, that makes you look bad. But there's another thing that you don't see on the other side of prison walls, and that is that a lot of staff say, do your aid and hit the gate. As long as we cleared the count and returned in all of our inventory, and you're walking out with the people with whom you walked through the gate, it's a successful day. Imagine how low that standard is. That's a pretty low bar. And that's why sometimes if you adhere to that standard of excellence, you may be, at the end of your career, feeling less than fulfilled. If you're a volunteer, would you do me a favor for Grace and Mercy Ministries? Would you stand up so I can get an idea of what we're dealing with here? If you're a volunteer and get into prisons, or you help people get into prisons, your role is far more significant in many ways than that of the staff who work in the prison. When we come to work, we have a bare bones minimum of making sure things are safe, but we're not making anything magical happen inside the prison, but you are. When you change the lives of men and women, and I myself am a man of faith. I am a Christian, was raised in a Christian home, and I was one of those babies in swaddling clothes in church the first day my mom could get me out of the house and into a church. But in prison, I don't get to do that ministry. And I am grateful for those of you who have the time to sit down and share the Word of God in a meaningful way to the inmate population. And I want to say thank you. For the record, I'm pretty convinced that there is not a book in the Bible that was written by a warden. But if you look at the New Testament, I think most of that was written by an inmate. You didn't think I was going to preach, did you? The church plays a very powerful role in what's going on here. I think that if you look at American Idol, The Voice, and America's Got Talent, almost every singer that comes through with a phenomenal voice started in church. And I have great stories over the years of what I've learned in church. But church taught me the most important lesson of all for a correctional employee, and that has to do with rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is not always a great word inside of the prison. Ever since Randy Brown's, the warden of Salinas Valley, left, and put me in position to be able to be the warden following him, I have asked a question for the last about 18 months to all of our staff. How many of you, by a show of raising your hands, these are mostly custody staff, believe that rehabilitation is possible? And I've gone weeks and months without anybody raising their hand. But there are tremendous statistics that might suggest why rehabilitation is so difficult. And when you start to look at the statistics of who ends up in prison, you start to kind of put together that there's a lot of things going on in this world that are broken, that allow people's lives to slide into a place where bad choices get them into prison. And statistics say that if you're beaten, if your parents are broken up, or if you come from a neighborhood where you've watched robberies and murders occur, or if you have tried drugs at a young age, or if you have been abused sexually, if you've been abused physically, or if you've been abused psychologically, you have a chance marginally higher than that I have to get into prison. So in my church days, I met a young lady. And she had been abused by her parents, by her mother, physically, stabbed in the head as a child, stabbed under the chin as a child, stabbed in the knee. And probably the most harrowing story that I got to hear from this young lady was that she was placed into a tub her mom had filled up. And she asked the oldest son to watch the other children. She went into the bathroom and attempted to drown her daughter to death. And except for the will to fight, stronger than the will of her mother to kill her, she would have actually died that day. And her brother years later called her weeping in apology for having helped mom by watching the kids. He might have been 10. So what do you think the chances are for somebody who gets abused their whole life, who's made to stay up all night long, and then at the crack of dawn be sent to school, who doesn't get fed, who gets beaten? What do you think the likelihood that that person is going to end up in prison? Well, she ended up spending about 21, but not actually in prison, just very near prison. She actually married a man who would become the warden of a prison. That young lady is my wife. I can confidently tell you she's the best person that I know. And I've come across a lot of great people. A lot of great people. And when people ask me, is rehabilitation possible? And I look at my wife, rehabilitation has been by my side for the last 32 years. Do I believe that God can change lives and restore people? Absolutely. I believe He can take Rick and John out of prison. The last time I saw John was on Alphiard. I saw him tonight standing there. He said, "Good to see you here." I said, "Weren't you on Alphiard?" And he said, "Yeah, about a month ago." I do believe that God changes lives. And when I see inmates and souls in those cells, and I do call them souls. Randy Grounds and I were working on a project in 2012. We had 6 suicides in our prison. And when alarms sounded and we heard over the radio that an inmate was hanging on to life, and we were calling code 3 for the outside medical to come into the prison to rescue this inmate, which means that our rescue is not going to be sufficient. We're calling 911 to get an ambulance into the prison. He took me down to the yard in his cart, his electric cart, and as we drove down there, he pounded his fist on the steering wheel and he said, "This is not acceptable." And you have to know that Randy Grounds wasn't that kind of guy that generally yelled. One time in the morning meeting, I'm telling on you, Randy, he said, "Pretend I'm yelling at you." Because he didn't often yell. But when he pounded his fist on the steering wheel and said, "This is not acceptable," not only did we go check out the scene and see what was going on, but we prayed. chief deputy warden and a warden in a cart, driving down to the yard. We said a prayer for that inmate. And Randy was an instrumental part in changing my hardened view about what was possible, because I'd been in a level 4 prison for so long. I think I was starting to become level 4 myself. And he helped me remember what was going on and what was possible. The state of prison is changing. I think you've heard. The voters recently voted for Prop 36 and again for Prop 47, taking some of those wobblers that were misdemeanors, or that were felonies, and turned them into misdemeanors. If you paid any attention to the legislature recently, the governor just signed Senate Bill 261, the Youthful Offender Act, that raised the age from 18 down to 23, where young men like Rick were sentenced to extremely long sentences and tried as adults when science suggests they weren't quite yet adults to begin with. And hope is springing eternal. We have judges giving a 3-judge panel decision to reduce the population of the state of California down to 137.5%, which we've already hit. But when judges and when legislators and when voters all agree that what we've been doing isn't working, then it's safe to say that it hasn't been working. The beauty of our state is that we may have actually, in many ways, as a legislative body, moved away from understanding what Christianity is about. And so when these programs come in that are faith-based and change lives, a lot of the legislators say, hey, that's kind of cool, try that. I think we moved so far away, they don't even understand it when it's coming. That faith-based actually works. I don't actually say it this way, I actually say it's moral rehabilitation. Because when an inmate stops thinking about the most important person I need to impress on this yard is the shot caller, and starts to think the most important person I need to impress is my Heavenly Father, then things change. And the day that Randy and I drove down to see that inmate who ultimately died from his attempted suicide, it was an actual completed suicide. We started a real intense focus of trying to interject any opportunities for suicide. And I don't know, I haven't actually had a chance to fill him in, but in 2015, Randy, Salinas Valley State Prison has not had any suicides. And every morning in the morning meeting, I introduce the count by saying we have 70 souls on board. I know that men's lives, because I deal with men, I'm sorry women if you've been in prison, I don't understand that side of the ledger because I've only been in a man's prison for 21 years. My understanding